Welcome to this special in-focused edition of Talking Points. Along with Anna Giles, I'm Nick Cardona. And our top talking points of this week are President Obama's recent poll numbers, Vice President Biden's trip to China, what Congress hopes to get done in these next couple of weeks before they go on break, and finally, an interesting interview on CNN that's getting some backlash. Talking Points starts right now. All right, so Anna, let's talk about these recent CNN ORC poll numbers that show the president's approval rating down to an all-time low of 41%. I mean, is this indicative of the president's entire term, or are they just reacting to these Obamacare recent struggles?
Right, Nick. These are the lowest the poll numbers have ever been in Obama's time as president. And I want to point out, a most recent poll. You mentioned CNN and ORC. A poll they released a couple weeks ago indicates that 53% of Americans now believe that Obama is not honest and trustworthy. Part of that is the effect of the Obamacare. And what that has done. Is it indicative of his entire presidency? No, not necessarily. He's gone through a rough patch now, but a lot of research does indicate it's hard to bounce back out of that. We've seen that. We saw it back in George Bush's presidency before him during the Iraq War. It's hard to bounce back from this. So it's not indicative of his entire presidency, but it's going to have an effect in the future, definitely.
Now, do people trust the president less as a result of the website's failure? I mean, if the website gets fixed, are all these troubles going to go away?
Not necessarily, because President Obama, this has been building up and up and up. He came into his new presidency with a big, very ambitious agenda: immigration reform, reducing inequality, his health care reform, and so far all of it has slowly gone down the hill. Immigration reform is completely dead, and as you mentioned, the fiasco with Obamacare. And like I just said, can he bounce back from it? Well, in order to bounce back from it, his website is going to have to blow over very nicely, and it's going to have to work very well for him to, get beyond that.
Now, is this are these poll numbers really are they related to the dysfunctional relationship that the president has with Congress, or is it just what are the poll numbers indicating?
Right, these poll numbers obviously aren't specific to Obama's relationship with Congress, but it is a part of that. And what I mean by that is the poll numbers indicate what people think of the president, and part of what people think of the president is his relationship with Congress and the fact that things just aren't getting passed. There have been reports from the White House that, Obama isn't one of those presidents that, has dinners with the other side or invites the other side into, the White House for a nice, friendly conversation. So that's just not how he does things. He does a lot of rhetoric. He's known for going on the campaign trail for issues and going out and, trying to rally public support instead of sitting down with the other side. And his relationship with Congress that's why they're saying Biden's relationship is to try and, bridge that gap between Congress and the presidency. But that really should be Obama's role. There was a big critique of him as a leader in The Economist recently, and the fact that he just can't seem to rally support and bridge those ties, which is, what the role of the presidency was ultimately supposed to be.
And I think with Vice President Biden, we're just going to talk about him and his trip to China. I mean, he's kind of, putting himself in a position for 2016, being able to talk to the other side. Now, I want to move to China and his recent trip there. I mean, does this say anything? Does this trip say anything about the future relationships with the Asian countries?
Right. This trip is, it's been making headlines. People are like, what's really going on here? What is an air defense identification zone? Well, I've got a definition here for you that I want to read out. Technically, what it is, it's an airspace over land or water in which the identification, location, and control of aircraft over land or water is required in the interest of national security. So basically what China is doing here is they've created a zone in which aircraft have to come in and say, give them their flight plans, identify themselves, and it's something they've done unilaterally without a lot of support, and it's basically an in-your-face, this is our territory, and they're exerting this over islands that aren't technically their territory. It's the East China Sea, that's the location, and it's two islands, the Diaoyu Islands, according to China, but the Senkaku Islands, according to Japan. Basically, Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, China, they're all, in a spat over these islands. Why? Because they're oil rich. There's some interest there. So this goes back to what this zone is. It's China trying to beef up, flex its muscles, and say, this is our territory. And as we've seen, because Biden just recently visited there, it's created some reaction.
Now, what does this say about the diplomatic and the security relationship between China and Japan, not only now, but in the future? Like, what are these trips and talks going to have an effect on the future? What's the effect?
Nick, everyone's saying, a lot of analysts are saying it's kind of a shame. Relations between Japan, China, and South Korea were actually starting to warm up. Things were starting to stabilize in the East China Sea, which has been an area of, big conflict for a while. And people are saying it's a shame that China went out and, it wasn't a good idea. That's what again, that's not considering the Chinese perspective. So from their side, they're wanting to exert more influence in that area. But, now we've pulled in the U.S. because the U.S. is a strong Japan ally. And, it's kind of a shame, some analysts are saying.
Is it a bad move for China, you think?
Well, from the perspective of Japan and the U.S., yes, it's a bad move for China. Looking at it from China's perspective, those islands are very valuable to them. They want to exert that influence. So is it a bad move overall? I would say yes, because they're creating that hostility in a region where, diplomacy could work better than starting to bring out the military here. We know the U.S. military is dominant. We spend the most on our military. Our allegiance is to Japan. If China wants to create that tension and spark a reaction, well, you bet the U.S. is involved because we have pledged, a security agreement with Japan to their, for their protection. We're definitely going to be brought into it, and we've got the best military in the world right now.
Well, I mean, it's going to be a story that we're going to be following, so we'll keep an eye on that. Now, I want to move to Congress, and we mentioned how the president has a dysfunctional relationship with them. They're not getting anything done. Some are saying that this is a bigger do-nothing Congress than the actual do-nothing Congress back in the 1940s. Now they go on break for the winter, for Christmas and the holiday season. What can they get done in that period of time or in the next couple of weeks before they go on break?
Right, Nick. As you said, it's been the do-nothing Congress. They've passed not very many bills. The ones they have passed have been things like naming monuments or wings of hospitals. These are the type of things that are, getting through, and it's very indicative of, how our political situation as of now. But to answer your question, what can get done? Well, in my opinion, not much. They're trying to take on budget deal. Immigration reform is dead, as I mentioned. Right now, what they're trying to, take on and pass is the farm bill as well as a budget deal. January 15th, that's the next deadline, because as we know, the big government shutdown that just took place, did they solve it? No, they just kicked the can down the road. Well, that can is coming back up on January 15th again. And so that's what, Paul Ryan in the House and Pat Murray in the Senate are trying. They're having breakout sessions now trying to find a deal. Will something happen? We've been working at this for a while. We haven't we haven't 12 annual budgets and we haven't passed a single one. So the outlook isn't looking too great.
Now, I mean, we've talked a lot about on this show, on this broadcast, about the 2014 midterm elections and what effect all this dysfunction is going to have on those elections. I mean, can the congressmen that are not getting anything done, as I've said, the do nothing Congress, are they going to be able to get reelected in this next cycle? Like, how is this going to shape the midterm elections?
Yeah, the midterm elections, it's just far enough that we're just waiting for the next catastrophe to break out. Obamacare was supposed to have a big effect on the midterm elections. As long as it goes smoothly, as I've mentioned, I think it's going to blow right over. People are going to forget that it was, a whole ordeal. In terms of what's going to happen in 2014, is the economy going to be a major issue? Definitely. We're seeing huge income inequality in the U.S. That is not something that is going to blow over. That will always be an issue, and that's definitely going to be something in the 2014 midterm elections. But as I said, in this country, it just depends on what the next catastrophe is. What's going to shape the 2014 midterms? Part of what I mentioned earlier, immigration reform being killed, that was in anticipation of midterm. No one wants to bring that up and discuss that because it's such a hot topic. No one wants that to affect midterm elections. So, like I said, it just all depends on what the next big thing is.
I mean, that is the problem a lot of people are having with our government, is that we govern from problem to problem, from catastrophe to catastrophe.
Precisely,
so I think that's just it's going to be a sticky situation. But I want to move to something that's a little bit more, controversial on the internet. It's gone viral with CNN's Chris Cuomo, Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York. They had an interview together. It was about the MTA, the Metro North train derailment,
that awful crash,
that killed four people and wounded many, many others. Yeah. Now, a lot of people are coming out and saying there's nothing wrong with it. It's a journalist interviewing a governor. But other people are saying this is a conflict of interest. What's your take on it?
Right, exactly. So Chris Cuomo does New Day, CNN in the morning. Why this is a big issue? Like you said, many people are just saying, oh, it's just a journalist interviewing an official. Well, not really. Journalism is what a lot of people like to call the fourth branch of government. But there's not technically a government body that supervises journalists, which is, that's how it's supposed to be. We're supposed to serve as that monitor. So I see it as, again, it's not a big hostile situation, a huge conflict of interest, but it's something I think should have been avoided. Chris Cuomo of New Day CNN should not have interviewed his brother.
He does have a lot of other people. CNN has, how many anchors do they have? They could have brought on somebody else to do that interview, because it's not like you said, it's not an issue of national security, but it is somewhat of a conflict of interest because the governor does have some sort of control over who is in charge of the Metro North. So I think that's also an interesting topic. But Anna, thank you as always. A great discussion on Talking Points. That does it for this special edition of Talking Points, and that will wrap up our semester here on The Hill. When Talking Points comes back in the spring, Anna will be taking over the sole hosting duties while I venture on over to London. Maybe join y'all for a few Skype calls from Buckingham Palace. And for the latest on all things politics, you can go to our blog, talkingpoints.blogspot.com, or like our Facebook page. For Anna Giles and all of our crew here at Talking Points and Citrus TV, have a great night. And remember, if it's political on the Hill, it's Talking Points.